I want to start with a few words about myself. I am the Customer Success Manager at Centuria. And today, basically, I replace Maciej, that is our CEO. And I'm from Centuria, that a company that was founded in 2006. And we were formerly focused on outsourcing services for data center, ISP, and we provided hosting and administration services for various industries. And since the very beginning of this year, we are focused only on Magento, only on hosting and administration of Magento services for our customers. And today, this presentation will have two parts. The first one will be the general one, and it will be the basic knowledge about the optimization approach and how we should look on the optimization before we do that. And the second part will be technical, and it will be deployment and infrastructure tricks and limitation workarounds. So, we want to discuss Magento performance, but first, I want to introduce Magento SOAP. It is our Magento infrastructure auditing approach. It is the way how we look on making Magento projects. We have security, operational excellence, availability, and performance. And we have to put us somewhere between those four edges of the square in the case to make some compromises and choose which of those are the most valuable for us. The fifth one is organizational standards and compliance. It's not always the case because some of the corporations have restrictions and policies that we should keep, but it's not always the case. But today, we'll focus on performance. First question, why are we optimizing? My friend Bartek told today that when the site is responsive, it is more inviting for the user is happy, and the conversion rates are better. And how we should look like on the optimization itself. Elijah Goldratt in the Gold Book told a very famous quotation that you all know, that the chain is now stronger than its weakest link. And he took an example of the car factory, car production, that the whole branch, the whole production is as good as its weakest element, like, for example, steering wheel. If producing a steering wheel is the weakest point, we have to focus on it, not to focus on anything else in the case of optimizing the whole environment. He found a few steps how to just follow them and try to expand the bottleneck of your project. You have to identify the constraint. So what's the bottleneck here? Exploit the system constraint, then subordinate everything else to the above decision. Then you elevate the system constraint. And when you do all of this, you will see that the thing we are working on is no longer a bottleneck in your infrastructure. So you have to always follow those steps and never stop. And one important assumption, that the goal have to be set. So we will have to know where we want to be, and we will have to know how we measure that. When it comes to Magento, to identify the constraints in your system, you can find various tools in the web, like GTmetrix, or you can install New Relic on your server just to check the performance, or monitor and check the performance with Zabbix. As far as I know, we have like 217 monitoring points for every single virtual machine. And then you can track where's the network latency and Just take a wild guess. You all know your infrastructure. You can't have some ideas. Where are your limitations? How to exploit the system constraints? You can broaden the bottleneck horizontally or vertically, or remove unnecessary workload from it. How to scale horizontally? Just plug in more power units, as simple as it is. In scenario A, we have one virtual machine that is responsible for our store. And if it's overload, you just add the second one and separate my SQL from the app server. We have more units, we have more performers. Let's go further. We can have two virtual machines responsible for the app. And you can load balance the traffic between the two of them. That will increase your performance. In order to keep the sessions of the clients, we implement Redis. Just because when the clients are browsing your store, they can lose their shopping cart when they are load balanced from the one to another. If we still want to scale horizontally, we can go on and sky's the limit. But on some point, we will see that our app server is no longer the bottleneck. What will be the bottleneck? Of course, the database. How to scale the database? Let's go back to the scheme with two virtual machines for the app, just to not to overcomplicate this. We implement replication, master-slave. The slave is connected to the apps with read-only access, and it's synchronized with the master, but it is always slightly just after it. The data here is never actual. Why we won't implement master-master replication? The answer is in the theory of mathematics. Theorem 1 says that it's impossible of distributed data store to simultaneously provide more than two of the following three guarantees: consistency, availability, or partition tolerance. It's called the SAP theorem. The second one says that in the absence of partitions, one has to choose between the latency and consistency. In Magento, let's go back here. In Magento, when we have two databases that want to be equal, and when someone buys a thing and you have to overwrite anything in your database, and you have to block it for some time, then make changes, and then make changes here as well. So instead of having one process, you have two. And the operations on the database are slow. So we can have master and master, but it will not boost our performance just because we are adding more operations to it. So we stay with the master-slave replication. When the database is still the bottleneck of our infrastructure, we can remove unnecessary workload from it. We can implement Varnish. Varnish remembers the sites that are generated here and keeps it in RAM memory just to throw it out directly to the user without making any calculations. It's fast, and when Varnish is made properly, it can have up to 90% of whole traffic. So it removes the unnecessary workload from here. We can add full page cache or remove the admin panel from the database in order to remove unnecessary workload from it. We can add external tools like Sorl and Elasticsearch, and that will help customers search for things, or RabbitMQ or ZeroMQ to just queue the processes that are not really crucial for the user to wait for. They can be done later. How to scale vertically? We just make faster current virtual machines. Just to simplify, a server contains of three main parts: CPU, RAM, and storage. And it has parameters that can be measured. And when they can be measured, they can be increased. Let's look at this table. We have 4 CPUs. Some are newer, some are older. One has 40 cores, and the rest has a lot less. But what's interesting, that when we have to make some operations that has to be made one after another, the overall performance doesn't really have sense because we have to focus on a single thread. So in some cases, when we have to do some single operations that have to be made one after another, we have to focus on the single thread. And on the first side, we see that, come on, this one is the best. But if you analyze your infrastructure, you can see that sometimes you can go with something different that will really increase the performance. What's with storage? We all know what's write about, and that write 0 increase the performance, write 1 increase the security. And look at some configurations. We have 4 disks. First 2 are HDD, then we have 2 SSDs. And same as with CPUs, we've gathered in our internal studies some data, and it turns out that if you change the ratio of read-only to read-and-write, your IOPS will have very, very different results. And you can see that the SSD, the first model of SSD, has around 20,000 IOPS, and it's better than the second one in the right one. But if we change the ratio, we can see that the second one is almost four times better. We can scale vertically the software, so simply upgrade. PHP 7 has more requests per second. Or use Nginx, because it's slightly faster. And here we are fighting for milliseconds, because most of the optimization happens on the front end. And most of the work is made by developers. But when they hit the ceiling, and they will go down to 2 seconds, or 2.5 seconds, and they can't do much more by implementing the changes in the software, hardware, on the whole infrastructure. We can go down to 2 seconds, or maybe even 1.7. Use static files in CDN, of course, but what for? When you analyze where's the biggest group of your clients, you can make a singular virtual machine with static content on it, an Nginx, and you connect it by choosing the right ISP with your users, with the biggest group of your users, and it will be faster. Of course, ISP can limit you with network, bandwidth, latency, and number of open ports. The last change can be made in operating system file system. When you turn off NOAA time or NOAA dirt time that are responsible for keeping the information for the access time to the file and the catalog, because they are unnecessary, you can improve the performers, or remove the barriers. So basically, that is all from me for now about how we approach to optimize the servers in our company. If you have any questions, you can mail me or you can phone me. Thank you very much.